Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Mushawar, and I lead our North America Partners Sales organization. And I joined AWS about 2 years ago for two primary reasons. Number one, it was all about going to work for one of the largest cloud providers and hyperscalers in the world. And the second one was really around the value that Amazon puts on diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. So I'm thrilled to be here hosting this panel of esteemed guests, really talking about the importance of building diverse teams, of builders, specifically in areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and defining the future of technology with diverse, inclusive, and accessible teams. So what we've seen is that too often, especially in some of these very technical roles, we miss building those teams. And when I'm talking about diversity and inclusion and equity, I'm not just talking about gender. We've had some conversations around educational background, so it's a whole mix of things. And a recent study published by New York University said that AI is a diversity disaster. And has resulted in flawed AI systems that perpetuate gender and racial biases. In fact, underrepresented communities in AI and ML have untapped potential to really contribute expertise, data, and change our recruitment strategies for how we go get that talent. So let's dive right in. Each of these esteemed panelists bring a unique perspective to their industries, and I'd love for each of you to perhaps introduce yourself, and let's add a little bit of fun to our audience. And why don't you share the last thing that you bought on Amazon after you introduce yourself? So we'll start with you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Tamika Hollis. I'm the president of Illuminate. I'm an AWS customer. So you could ask, what is Illuminate? We provide government agencies, commercial and network providers with the information that helps you protect your mission. And we do that by getting through to collect all the data so that you can make more informed decisions faster. And so it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited to share how Illuminate is breaking down those barriers with AI and ML.
And the last thing you bought on Amazon, I'm not letting you get by that easy.
So that's a trick. I mean, it's been all week. I don't know who hasn't bought something on Amazon. I will say today, my best friend's birthday is next week, and I'll be in Scotland, so I ordered her, she lives in Chicago, a hat and scarf set.
Excellent. I'm sure that's feeding some algorithm in the background.
Oh, yes.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lorraine Nur, and I am the senior manager of data architects here at AWS. And by data, I mean I support AI, ML, databases, analytics, storage, and I do that for our strategic accounts, which are 25 of our most innovative and relevant accounts based on industries that they are in. And I've been here about 2 years, and similar to Rachel, when I made the decision to come here, I had been a customer since 2014, and I thought it would be really cool to be able to influence the direction of the products that AWS is building, especially as a woman. So I am thrilled to share some of my experiences and thoughts with you. And the last product that I actually ordered from Amazon is my kicks that I am wearing today because I wanted to be sure to have comfy shoes for the 25 plus miles that most of us will have walked this week while you're here at reInvent.
Great. What about you, Juan?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Jaramillo, and I'm the Director of Engineering at Factored. So what we try to achieve and what we do at Factored is we build high-caliber data science, machine learning, and data engineering teams to happen to work for US companies. And we find these engineers from different geographical areas who happen to superpose in with US time zones. And we apply a very rigorous qualification and advanced training process so that we can ensure that these engineers calibrate to Silicon Valley levels of rigor so that they can work for different US companies and accounts that are using AWS and whatnot, right? And so my role as a director of engineering is to make sure that we have a well-oiled machine, meaning that I help with recruiting, testing, training, and matching all the amazing pool of talented engineers that we have so that we can match them to the deals and opportunities that we get from US companies. The last thing I bought at Amazon, I think it was a vacuum cleaner. Wish I really haven't started using it yet, but I think I'm gonna use it anytime soon.
You will.
So the last thing I bought on Amazon was socks, because I don't know about you all's dryers, but my dryers seem to eat socks and they return as Tupperware lids. So, because you've got more Tupperware lids than you have containers and you have fewer pairs of socks. So that's...
They're living together somewhere.
Somewhere. I haven't figured it out yet. I want to start by talking about the ways that we've seen diverse teams make an impact, and then we can shift and talk about what we can all do to increase representation. So, Tamika, let's start with you. I'd love for you to share some of the innovative work that you are doing with our government and our military operations, and how is AI and ML helping to power those innovations? And share with us a little bit about the diverse group of developers and how that's really fueled the outcome.
Definitely. So Illuminate is a global business, and we have a hard line into the government agencies, and one of the key programs that we've been working on in the last year is AVA. And it is a device that when a soldier is deployed, sometimes you have to be off the grid. So they'll drop you in a location, they don't want you to turn the connection on to the outside world, and so we have this device that is basically a phone, and we will tell them, how do you go to high ground? What is the poisonous snakes? What are foods you can eat in that area? What's the closest military base? And they have to scan things in their horizon to be able to know where they are and how do they characterize where danger is and how do they stay safe. And so we do all that by programming this phone that's not connected, preset on where they're going to be, and get the machine to recognize everything that's going on. And so for me, it's important for us as Illuminate, we employ engineers across the country when it has to be military based. And then if we are able to draw in, we have people in Africa as well as a facility in Scotland. And so being able to bring in people with different backgrounds to be able to generate that code helps us to really cut down those barriers for bias that exists right now when you look at a shoe. I was watching a YouTube video, was just talking about how you recognize a shoe now. And when you look at pictures, if you Google shoe, what really comes up? And our cute shoes wouldn't be on there. Because people that's not what they think about when people think about shoes. And so how do you program in those things when you think about what does a snake look like that could be poisonous? What are you going to show? What does everybody usually think about? And how do you bring in other ideas so to make sure you get the full picture of what could be out there for you?
Wow. All right, Juan, we know that the Latinx population is dramatically underrepresented in tech, and Factored is actively working to be a solution. Right. Now, you focus on providing opportunities to Latinx engineers, and it's more than just about leveling the playing field. Can you Can you tell us more about that asset and the unique value that you're adding?
Sure. So we like to think about the conversation about underrepresentation in artificial intelligence and machine learning as a two-sided conversation. And we are players. Factor is a player in both sides. We are practitioners as well as users of AI-enabled solutions. And so on the practitioner side, for example, we invest a lot of effort in upskilling our workforce, and we have built one of the largest and more complete data teams of Latino and Latinas, data engineers, and data scientists. I think this is one of our premises, which is there's a gold mine of technical talent out of Latin America, which has been ignored for a long time. And so our mission, part of our mission really is to make this gold mine visible to the world, and at the same time, let businesses know that diversity is actually good for their solutions. It's actually good for business. And so, for example, we have published multiple papers in the field of natural language processing and speech recognition, where we have helped build these data sets and technology that smart speakers like Alexa, for example, use to better understand the way humans speak. So what are the different accents? What are the different phonetic differences? What are the differences in voices? And so I think the solutions that we help build actually impact the NLP solutions or the NLP applications, as well as these smart speakers, for example, and make them more representative and help them to improve and boost the reach of these solutions. And so in summary, I think not only representation, it's the right thing to do just because we might want to make an impact in the world, but rather because these solutions serve a larger population and give more results for all the users that are using these products.
Excellent. So, Lorraine, I'm going to ask you the same question, but with the focus on those who identify as women. How are women uniquely positioned to help make a positive impact in the AI and ML field?
So I think as a data geek, long-term data geek, one of the things that I operate on is data, obviously. So women are, 49.6% of the worldwide population. According to Gartner, they make up about 20% of data scientists, which is a pretty significant number. I was surprised to see it. But what I have found is that you bring women into data science and machine learning, as Tamika shared, your perspective is different. The experiences that they draw from, whether you're, a woman, another underrepresented minority, when you look at the way models are developed, you're going to look at the importance of features differently than someone who has not been a minority. You're going to weight the historical features different. How do you score different components of a model? And one of the things that we've seen is I've recently had 3 women artificial intelligence architects join. And the approach that they bring is much more collaborative. It's a much more open of let's discuss what the scoring on a feature should be. Traditionally, data scientists, the term quants, your statisticians, has been more solitary. You sit in a cube, you write your process, you look at your data, and then you deliver a result set. And when you bring in the different perspectives, you're creating a more open, collaborative environment that has more perspectives. So I think it's critical to represent the entirety of the populace experience. That's one of the things women bring. I mean, your shoe example is just spot on, right? Because they're high heels, but they're still shoes, right? So it's like that is the key, is to what you look at for us to change the model so they know you don't just, shoes are everything from sneakers to high heels to boots. So for us, that's really important to bring that perspective in.
Great. I think we have to change the search criteria to uncomfortable shoes. And they might show up. They might show up. But I'm sure we've all had challenges in making business cases for inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. What I found is it's oftentimes something everybody wants to do, but it often becomes you do this initiative over here, and then you've got the business outcomes over here, and people treat them like they're two separate things. And I would argue that it's actually one and the same, right? You stated that 46.9% of the population are women. ID&E and business outcomes go hand in hand, and I think it really starts as a culture inside of a company. It's not an initiative. It's not something the board tells you to go do. It's got to be a culture. But Tamika, I'd love for you to weigh in a little bit and share your perspective.
I think a lot of times companies try to take on the whole world, right? And you're like, that is just so big. And so you want to break it into those chunks. So a couple things, when I first started at Illuminate, I started as the COO right during COVID. And it was in June, which is when we were having all that unrest around everything around DE&I. And little things like, they were little to me. I was like, we have to put out a leadership statement to talk about the company's position and support. And I was shocked that we hadn't done anything. And I'm like, okay, let's get something out, right? And it's letting the organization know, especially we're based in DC, where a lot of things were happening, that Illuminate is supportive and we stand behind initiatives. One thing around my teams is now you have to have a woman and a diverse person on a leadership panel when we're interviewing people, right? Because you want to make sure that you're getting all perspectives when you're hearing information. I love panel interviews also at the same time because we all interpret things differently, right? Rachel might hear something that I didn't, and as we talk about it later, no, I thought this is what they were saying, right? And so making that be part of the process of what Illuminate does is one thing that I did just to make sure that we are staying truthful and honest around, we really value D&I, and this is how it shows up.
So, Lorraine, I know that you're doing some very targeted recruiting with women. What would you say is the most crucial step in getting more women into AI and ML fields?
For me, it has been at those events, and we've done targeted events at women. As I mentioned, we did Grace Hopper. We have done Lesbians Who Code. And it's the representation, and Tamika, as you shared, we take a diverse team to those events. So it's not just about looking to see someone who looks and sounds like you, but the diversity across that of, women who are lesbians, who are white, who are black, who may have neurodiversity, and giving them that example, that representation of, I am here, I've traveled this path, I've done this before. It is so crucial to show what the journey can look like, where you can end up. And we do I personally do a lot of warming calls, like to have that conversation of, this is not, don't be, nervous about coming here, especially if you all know, like if you've ever interviewed with Amazon or AWS, it's a daunting process to interview here. So we set them up with mentors, women who are in that field, whether it's AI ML or serverless, and we give you that guidance. It's you want to see that you've got someone who looks like that, and that has resulted in, when I got here, my team was 10% diverse, and as of my most recent 2 hires, I'm now up to 35% diverse, which is something I'm very proud of, and it's a result of those targeted recruiting events and conversations that we've had.
Great.
I'd like to add.
Yeah, please.
I think the other thing for me personally also, you talk about your own personal self, is how do you, I go to Society of Women Engineers. That's one of the conferences I go to look for women who are really already interested in STEM and to get them to see that you can do that, right? So they can see the progression. It's important for people to see someone and understand that I can make it. I think the other thing I tell people, I was just at a school also, right? Because it starts early. So I went to a school that has a science and technology component, and I talked about how I'm in cyber now. That wasn't a degree, right? If you think about it, I'm running a cyber intelligence company, and when I went to engineering school years ago, right, it didn't exist. So how can somebody would say, how can you run a cyber company and that wasn't what your degree was in? We were just talking about people's different degree, but just showing them that's something you learn how to attack a problem, and you can learn the technical things behind it because it continues to change and evolve, but being dedicated to wanting to learn and wanting to solve a problem.
Let's double tap on that for a second, because I do think it's super interesting when, especially for people who are younger in their careers. I think they come out of school thinking, oh geez, I came out of school with a communications degree, or I came out of school with an engineering degree, therefore I must. I'd love some thoughts on, just educational diversity and how that's fared, right? I don't have a degree in statistics. I thank God. Because I probably wouldn't have made it. But I'd love to hear from any of you around that. Yes, please.
Yeah, I would like to talk about the experience that we have had at Factor, because there's a lot of people that we have that have major in music, in law, in economics, all sorts of STEM-related backgrounds, but at the same time, I'll say that the best engineers that we have majored in music, actually. And so, one of the things that I think it's important and that Factor brings to the table is it's the upskilling that we provide to engineers and data scientists in general. What we have really done is found this, as I was telling you, this amount of talent that it's coming out of Latin America with the necessary experience in related data projects. And then what we do is we come in, we work in and provide these advanced training programs with instructors from MIT and Stanford as well, but also with all different resources that we can bring to the table to upskill these engineers, and that they calibrate to the level and the rigor that you will expect from someone to work in AWS or in all the solutions architect that you have in your team, right? So I think basically the premise that Factor has is human intelligence is evenly distributed across the world, and we're bringing that talent that has been completely discovered out of the normal zip codes that you will find from the Bay Area, or out of the people's limitations that you will expect from their resumes, or the non-negotiable skills that people will have in their resumes, right? We were talking about certain companies will just stick to certain professional experience or skills, and what we really do is look beyond all that and make all this talent visible.
That is, one of our leadership principles is learn and be curious.
Okay.
Right, here at AWS. And I also, similar to Rachel, for me, it's even worse. My undergraduate degree is in communications and business. And so when I came out, I was like, I'm going to run a business. I'm going to, write press releases or something like that. And what I look for now is how do you think? We don't give a coding test any longer, right, is part of the criteria when we're evaluating candidates. They have a technical conversation. How do you solve this problem? How would you approach it? And it really has changed and helped us diversify the type of talent that we brought on. And there's, to Juan's point, that upskilling, that training it's here, right? It's available. Like AWS also has a lot of free training that you can use if you have that interest to do so.
Yeah, so you can't necessarily teach attitude, but you can certainly teach
Correct.
aptitude.
That's right.
For sure. Great. So I say all of the time, you cannot be what you cannot see. And in the same spirit, Tamika, I know it's important to you to personally not just be up here to represent Illuminate, but help other women see a career path for themselves. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and how you got here?
I can definitely do that. I think when I got out of undergrad, I went to Florida A&M, and I wanted to work on cars. And I tell people I moved I worked for Ford, I moved to Michigan to get my master's. I was like, this is what I'm gonna do, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, it's cold, sorry. Anybody from the Midwest? I think it was more drastic to go from Florida I didn't really think about the weather. And so I moved actually to California, and I built satellites. So DirecTV, XM, I designed the control algorithm, and I was loving that. And I did that for a while, and then I said I wanted to move back to the East Coast. I got married, I'm like, am I gonna have kids? I wanted to be closer to my family on the East Coast. And if you work in defense, you either live in California or you live in DC. So I moved back to DC, and I work for Northrop Grumman, so it's a big defense contractor. I worked there for 17 years. Went from being an individual contributor, so I started as a system engineer, then I ran a program, then I ran an engineering department, then I ran a business, and then I became a vice president. And I was like, but what's left, right? I was under 40 at that point, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this for the next 20 years, 15 years for me. And I'm like, there's gotta be more. And in a company that big, even as a vice president, there's so many people, layers between you and the CEO that kind of start directing your path, even in that level. And so when I got recruited, headhunters, I actually started listening. They call, and I usually don't answer the phone. And I was like, I'm gonna actually entertain. And then they called me about the position for Illuminate, and somebody talked about it earlier in another session about how they asked me to do one job, which was to run a business. And as we were talking during the interview process, they were like, no, you're gonna be the COO and later become the president of the company. And I was like, that sounds great. And I took the job in 2020, and at the beginning of this year, I became the president. And it's just exciting to just be in charge of a company that Tamika can kind of guide where Illuminate is going, and I have a board that's very supportive, and it's just great. But I would have never even imagined that.
It's a great example
30 years ago.
Blazing the path and trusting your intuition. So what advice, Lorraine, would you have to folks in the audience or others who are looking to get into AI and ML careers? Where do they start? What does that look like? What was your career journey?
So for me, I think it's, you don't have to, well, with the exception of some of the defense industries, as we discussed, where, when you're in civil service, you must check all these boxes. But Juan and I were talking about this as well. It really is about your appetite to learn and your curiosity. AI ML is in every aspect of what you do today. Right? Everything that you see, the tickets, the movies that are offered to you on Netflix or Amazon Prime, what you see on Facebook, right? Don't be afraid to stretch yourself. And one thing I would say is that has helped me enormously on my journey is if you know someone who's doing something that you're interested in the AI ML, right, like deep learning, neural networks. If any of you here participated in Deep Racer, those aren't all AI ML people. They are people who have a passion for Deep Racer. So they raise their hand and they volunteer and they get trained, and it's one of the most popular exhibits that we have here. But look for someone who's doing something that you aspire to do or that is in a role like Tamika's that you aspire to look at, and reach out and make that connection. find that mentor, that sponsor to show you the way. I was lucky enough to have two women that were definite guideposts for me in terms of even coming here to AWS. I was like, I don't know if I want to work for a software company, like sit on the other side of the table. And they were like, this would be great. You can influence product. So don't be afraid and find someone who can help guide you, right? And take control of it. If you know you have a gap, look to fill it. It's your career, it's your control.
I think that's great advice. Something that I regularly share with those who come to me is, you wouldn't take advice about how to go run a marathon from someone who's never run a marathon. Why do you do that with your career? And a lot of people, it just takes them a moment to think through well, I've never run a marathon. But if you do, who would you go to? I've never run a marathon, don't take advice from me. But if you took it from someone else that's been down that path,
exactly,
the outcome allows you to get to your end result quicker, and they can help you navigate through some of those things.
And don't be afraid to ask for a mentor or a sponsor. I mean, the worst thing is they can say no. Even when I am full and I make myself available for women and underrepresented minorities specifically as a sponsor and as a leader, make the request. They may not have time, but they sure as heck are probably going to know a peer who will have time to help give you that guidance.
Yeah. If I may add something to what you're saying and what Tamika was saying, I think part of Tamika being a trailblazer and me growing personally, when I was in high school, when I was studying math and I was studying programming, I did not know a single person that was sort of Latin American. Of course, I had teachers and everyone was Latin American, but we didn't know these people from a U.S. Hispanic background or from a Latino background who was having a leadership in a tech relevant role, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think for me personally to be here in this stage, in this panel, and to encourage Latinos to be in leadership roles in technology, I think that boosts a little bit the motivation that new generations will have, so they can pursue a career in AI ML in general, right?
Great. Okay. As we start to wrap up, what are some actionable steps folks can take to become better allies or drive more diversity, inclusion? You talked about neurodivergence in the AI and ML fields. Juan, let's start with you.
I think my advice there will be to try to seek the opportunity to mentor others. If you're interested to know more about the AI engineering in general, the AI engineering field in general, or if you're interested to meet engineers, or if you're a Latino engineer yourself who is interested to meet a company that can invest in you, I think you should look for Factored, and we can help you. I think we can become a better ally for companies who are trying to print some diversity in their teams. And yeah, I think mentorship it's important for being an ally.
Tamika, what about you?
When I think about it, I would say individually, your vote counts. So when you see, we're talking about getting rid of the bias. When you see the bias happening, a lot of times as leaders, we don't recognize that we are being biased, right? Our bias is just because of who we are and the experiences that we have. It's going to drive something. Don't be afraid to let your view be heard, and point out when you see something not necessarily going the right way or someone's leaning heavily to the right every time. Point it out, because sometimes they don't recognize, and you'll be surprised a lot of times at the response that you'll get. Try something new. I think we all talked about how this isn't the path that we thought we would be on. So if you're headed one way, I know they're not all engineers in here, but engineers are you're planners and you're very methodical. So when something takes you out of that, it makes you uncomfortable, right? But being uncomfortable can be good for you.
Yeah. Lorraine, anything to add?
Say, like, we had this conversation this morning, similar to what Tamika's saying. If you see something that doesn't look right, and I was with a customer and we were talking about modernization of hospitality models, and the legacy models are heavily, white male authored, and they don't take into the perspective of different cultural norms and what you would like. And we talked about raising your hand to say, this doesn't look right. And just raise that, whether you are the model developer or you're the consumer, you're the business person. Say that, like, I don't think this looks right. So I would echo what Tamika said, like, you've got to say something if it doesn't look right, if it doesn't pass the sniff test for you.
That's right. Well, I think for me, regardless of AI or ML, what I've heard from the three of you is learn and be curious. Raise your hand. Look for new ideas. If you're uncomfortable, you're probably in the right spot, and continue to hire and develop talent. I'll tell you real quickly, when I accepted my job at AWS after going through our grueling interview cycle where I had no mentors or sponsors walking me through, I remember the recruiter said, Rachel, we'd love to hire you here, but I don't know what your job will be. Do you want to come? And my first answer was absolutely. I had no idea what job it was. She called me back a few days later and said, okay, well, here's a couple jobs that we think you could be in. But it was just one of those moments of, hey, I think this is an opportunity to go learn something and build something. And it's that type, I think, of courage to just start to raise your hand and try things. Because you're not going to know, right? You said, if you don't ask, what's the answer?
Yeah.
It's always no. So with that, I appreciate what each of you are doing in your industries. Please keep doing it. And for those of you in the audience, when we talk about how to get in touch with these wonderful panelists, here's some contact information. And I think if we did this right, we are right at time. So let's give these wonderful panelists a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.